In the mountains of Afghanistan, 7 enemy snipers had pinned down an entire SEAL team for 3 days. These weren't ordinary shooters. They were ghosts who could put a bullet through a man's eye from over 1,000 yards away. The SEALs, America's most elite warriors, found themselves trapped like sitting ducks. Every time they moved, another one of their brothers fell. The mission was falling apart, and extraction seemed impossible. Then, something happened that no one saw coming. A figure emerged from the rocks, not in military gear, not carrying the latest high-tech weapons, but moving with deadly purpose. What happened next would be talked about in military circles for years to come. Because sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't the one you expect. The sun was setting behind the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez of the sunsets back home in Texas. But there was nothing peaceful about this evening. For 3 days, his 8-man SEAL team had been trapped in a rocky outcrop, surrounded by enemy fighters who seemed to know their every move before they made it. Rodriguez pressed his back against the cold stone and checked his ammunition for the 100th time. 6 magazines left. His team was running low on everything: ammo, water, medical supplies, and, most importantly, options. The mission that was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance had turned into a nightmare when they stumbled upon a major Taliban stronghold. "Contact left," whispered Petty Officer James Chun into his radio, barely audible even to Rodriguez, who was crouched just 3 feet away. Another sniper had them in his sights. These weren't the typical insurgent fighters they usually faced. These snipers were professionals, possibly foreign fighters who had come to Afghanistan specifically to hunt American Special Forces. Rodriguez had been a SEAL for 12 years. He had served 4 tours in Iraq and 3 in Afghanistan. He had seen urban warfare in Fallujah, mountain fighting in the Karingal Valley, and desert operations in Syria. But he had never faced anything quite like this. The enemy snipers seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They would take a shot and then vanish like smoke, only to reappear somewhere completely different. The team's radio operator, Petty Officer 2nd Class Mike Thompson, was trying to raise their headquarters for the 5th time that hour. "Bravo Base, this is Neptune 7, do you copy?" Static filled the air. The mountains were notorious for blocking radio signals, and their satellite phone had taken a bullet during the first firefight. Rodriguez studied the faces of his men. They were all experienced warriors, each one handpicked for this mission. There was Chun, the team sniper, who could thread a needle at 800 yards. Thompson, whose technical skills had gotten them out of impossible situations before. Martinez, the explosives expert who could make a bomb out of household items or disable one with his eyes closed. Williams, the medic who had saved more lives than he could count. Davis, the youngest member of the team, but already a veteran of dozens of operations. And, finally, Chief Petty Officer Robert Anderson, Rodriguez's second-in-command and closest friend. They had all volunteered for this mission when intelligence suggested that a high-value Taliban commander was operating out of this region. The plan had been simple: get in, gather information about enemy positions and strength, and get out. No direct engagement unless absolutely necessary. But sometimes, even the best plans fall apart. It had started going wrong on the 2nd day when they were moving through a narrow valley. Chin had spotted the glint of a scope in the rocks above them. But before he could take the shot, bullets started flying from multiple directions. The team had taken cover behind whatever they could find: boulders, dead trees, anything that would stop a bullet. That's when they realized they were dealing with something different. These weren't random shots from AK-47 sprayed in their general direction. These were precise, calculated shots from high-powered rifles. Professional shooters who knew exactly what they were doing. "Movement, 2 o'clock, Anderson whispered, pointing toward a ridge about 400 yards away. Rodriguez raised his binoculars and scanned the area. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, just for an instant, he caught sight of a figure moving between the rocks. Tall, wearing dark clothing, carrying what looked like a Dragunov sniper rifle. Chun was already lining up his shot through his scope. "I've got eyes on one of them," he said quietly. "Range is 380 yards. I can take him." "Negative," Rodriguez said immediately. "The moment you fire, his buddies will light us up from 6 different directions. We need to think our way out of this one." That had been their situation for 3 days. Every time they tried to move, the snipers would force them back into cover. Every time they tried to call for help, something would go wrong with their communications. They were running out of food, water, and, most critically, time. Their mission commander would eventually send a search and rescue team, but that could be days away. They might not have days. Williams, the medic, crawled over to where Rodriguez was positioned. "How are we doing on water?" Rodriguez asked. "Not good," Williams replied. "Maybe enough for one more day if we're careful. Martinez took a bullet fragment in the shoulder yesterday, but it's not serious. Everyone else is okay physically, but morale is starting to drop." Rodriguez nodded. He could see it in their faces. These were some of the toughest men in the world, but everyone has a breaking point. Being hunted by invisible enemies who could kill you from half a mile away would test anyone's nerves. "Boss," Thompson called out softly. "I think I'm getting something on the radio." Rodriguez crawled over to where Thompson was hunched over their communications equipment. Through the static, they could hear faint voices speaking in what sounded like Dari, one of the local languages. Thompson had learned enough of the language during his deployments to understand basic conversations. "What are they saying?" Rodriguez asked. Thompson listened for several minutes, occasionally adjusting the frequency to get a clearer signal. "They're coordinating," he said finally. "Sounds like they're planning to move positions tonight. Something about the Americans in the rocks, and finishing the job before dawn." This was not good news. If the enemy was planning a coordinated assault, the SEAL team would be in serious trouble. Their defensive position was good against snipers taking shots from a distance, but it wouldn't hold up against a determined ground assault with multiple attackers coming from different directions. Rodriguez gathered his team for a quick briefing. They formed a tight circle, speaking in whispers that would be impossible to hear from more than a few feet away. "Here's the situation," he began. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on supplies. The enemy is planning to hit us hard tonight, probably just before dawn when visibility is poor, but there's enough light for them to coordinate their attack." He paused to let this sink in. These men had been in tough situations before, but this was about as bad as it got. "We have three options," he continued. 1. We try to break out now while it's still daylight, and hope we can move faster than they can track us. 2. We dig in here and prepare for their assault. 3. We try something unexpected. Anderson leaned forward. "What kind of unexpected?" "I've been thinking about this," Rodriguez said. "These snipers are good, maybe the best we've ever faced. But they're expecting us to act like a conventional military unit. They're expecting us to either run or fight. What if we do something completely different?" Chen looked skeptical. "Like what?" "We turn the tables. Instead of being the hunted, we become the hunters." The idea was risky, maybe even crazy. But the more Rodriguez thought about it, the more it made sense. The enemy snipers had been successful because they were patient, methodical, and unpredictable. But what if the SEALs could use those same tactics against them? "Here's what I'm thinking," Rodriguez explained. "We split into two groups. One group, led by Anderson, stays here and maintains our defensive position. They make noise, use the radio, basically make it look like we're all still here preparing for their attack." "And the other group?" Martinez asked. "The other group, just 3 of us, moves out after dark. We use night vision and move like ghosts. While the enemy is focused on this position, we get behind them and start taking them out one by one." It was a dangerous plan. Splitting up their already small force would make both groups more vulnerable. And trying to move at night through terrain controlled by enemy snipers was extremely risky. But Rodriguez was convinced it was their best chance. The team spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Anderson would stay at their current position with Williams, Thompson, and Martinez. Their job was to maintain radio chatter, move around enough to create the impression of activity, and be ready to provide covering fire if needed. Rodriguez would lead the hunting party with Chun and Davis. They would wait until full darkness, then move out using night vision goggles. Their goal was to locate and eliminate the enemy snipers before the planned dawn assault. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains and darkness settled over the valley, Rodriguez made final checks of his equipment. Night vision goggles, suppressed rifle, extra ammunition, and emergency medical supplies. Everything he would need for a night of hunting. But as they prepared to move out, None of them realized that they were not the only hunters in these mountains that night. Somewhere in the darkness, another predator was already on the move. Someone who had been watching this deadly game unfold for days. Someone who understood these mountains better than any of them. And someone who was about to change everything. The three seals slipped away from their position just after midnight, moving like shadows through the rocky terrain. They had no idea that before the sun rose again, everything they thought they knew about this mission would be turned upside down. And the enemy they had been fighting for 3 days was about to become the least of their worries. Rodriguez led his small team through a narrow ravine that would provide concealment while they maneuvered toward the suspected sniper positions. The night was clear and cold, with enough starlight to make their night vision equipment highly effective. Every sound seemed amplified in the thin mountain air: the scrape of a boot on rock, the quiet click of a rifle safety being disengaged, even their own breathing. They had been moving for about an hour when Chun, who was bringing up the rear, suddenly froze and held up a closed fist, the signal for immediate halt. Rodriguez and Davis dropped into defensive positions, scanning for threats. Chin's voice came through their radio earpieces, barely above a whisper. "Movement behind us. Someone's following our trail." Rodriguez felt his blood turn cold. If enemy fighters had discovered their departure from the main position, both groups could be in serious trouble. He hand-signaled for Davis to continue watching their front while he and Chin dealt with whatever was behind them. The minutes stretched out like hours as they waited in complete silence, listening for any sound that might indicate the position of whoever was following them. Rodriguez was beginning to think Chin might have been mistaken when they heard it. The soft sound of someone moving carefully through the rocks, trying to be quiet, but not quite succeeding. Rodriguez made a decision. They couldn't continue their mission with an unknown enemy following them. And they couldn't go back to their defensive position without potentially compromising Anderson's team. They would have to deal with this threat here and now. He signaled for Chun and Davis to spread out and surround whoever was following them. It was a risky move in the darkness, but they were running out of options. Rodriguez moved to his left, using a series of boulders for concealment. Chun went right, and Davis stayed in the center to block any retreat. Rodriguez was in position when he saw the figure moving through the rocks below him. Definitely human, moving with purpose, but not with the practiced silence of a trained soldier. He raised his rifle and activated his infrared laser, painting a target on the figure's back. Through his night vision, he could see Chun doing the same from the opposite side. "Stop," Rodriguez called out in both English and what little Dari he knew. "Do not move." The figure froze instantly, hands visible and empty of weapons. But something was wrong. The size and shape didn't match what Rodriguez was expecting. This person was smaller than the enemy fighters they had encountered, and the way they moved suggested. "Turn around slowly," Rodriguez commanded, keeping his rifle trained on the figure. "Keep your hands where I can see them." When the person turned around, Rodriguez almost couldn't believe what he was seeing through his night vision goggles. It was a woman, probably in her 30s, wearing dark civilian clothes and carrying what appeared to be a hunting rifle. Her face showed no fear, only calm determination. "Who are you?" Rodriguez demanded, though he kept his voice low to avoid attracting attention from any nearby enemies. The woman replied in accented but clear English. "My name is Fatima. I have been watching your fight with the foreign snipers. I can help you." Rodriguez exchanged glances with Chun and Davis. This was not what any of them had expected to encounter on their night mission. An Afghan woman, alone in the mountains at night, claiming she wanted to help them fight enemy snipers? "How do we know you're not working with them?" Chun asked suspiciously. Fatima's expression hardened. "Because they killed my husband and my 2 sons 3 weeks ago. They are not Taliban or Afghan fighters. They are foreigners, Chechens, I think, who came here to hunt Americans. They have taken over our village and turned our home into their base." Rodriguez lowered his rifle slightly, but kept it ready. This woman's story might explain a lot about why these enemy snipers were so effective. If they were indeed foreign fighters with extensive training and experience, that would account for their professional tactics and advanced equipment. "Even if that's true," Rodriguez said, "this is a military operation. You need to get to safety and let us handle this." Fatima shook her head. You do not understand. You have been the path Fatima led them along would have been treacherous even in daylight. In the darkness, with only night vision to guide them, it seemed almost impossible. She moved like a mountain goat, finding handholds and footholds that were invisible to the trained seals behind her. More than once, Rodriguez found himself wondering if this mysterious woman was leading them to their deaths. They had been climbing for almost 2 hours when Fatima suddenly stopped and held up her hand for silence. Rodriguez immediately dropped into a crouch, his rifle ready. Chun and Davis took defensive positions on either side of the narrow trail they had been following. "What is it?" Rodriguez whispered into his radio. Fatima pointed ahead to where the path curved around a large boulder. "One of their listening posts is just around that rock. One man with a radio and night vision. He watches this approach to their main camp." Rodriguez studied the terrain through his scope. The position she indicated would be perfect for an observation post. Good views in multiple directions, cover from return fire, and a clear escape route if needed. If there really was an enemy fighter there, getting past him without being detected would be crucial to the success of their mission. "How do you know he's there?" Rodriguez asked. Fatima's expression was grim. "Because I have watched him for 6 nights. Same position, same routine. He arrives at 10 p.m. and leaves at 4 a.m. He drinks tea from a thermos at midnight and again at 2 a.m. He checks his radio every 20 minutes. The level of detail in her surveillance was impressive and disturbing at the same time. This woman had been conducting her own intelligence operation against these enemy fighters, and she had been doing it alone and on foot. Rodriguez checked his watch, 1:45 a.m. If Fatima was right, the sentry would be checking his radio in about 10 minutes, and he would be having his second tea break in 15 minutes. That would be their window. "Here's what we're going to do," Rodriguez said quietly. "Chun, you're going to move to a position where you can see the observation post. When the sentry reaches for his radio, you take the shot. Davis, you're going to move around to the left and make sure there are no other surprises waiting for us." "What about me?" Fatima asked. Rodriguez looked at her seriously. "You stay here and keep watch. If anything goes wrong, you get back to our main position and tell Chief Anderson what happened." Fatima shook her head. "You do not understand. If you kill that sentry, his radio silence will alert the others within 30 minutes. They have strict check-in procedures. But if you let me handle this, I can make it look like an accident or equipment failure." Rodriguez was skeptical. "How?" "I have been watching them for 3 weeks. I know their routines, their procedures, their weaknesses. Trust me." Against his better judgment, Rodriguez found himself nodding. Everything about this situation went against his training, but something told him that this woman knew what she was talking about. "What's your plan?" he asked. Fatima pointed to a series of loose rocks above the observation post. "There is a natural rockslide area just above his position. If rocks fall during the night, he will think it is natural. He will call in to report it, but that is normal. It will not alert them. And how do we cause this rockslide?" Fatima smiled for the first time since they had met her. "Leave that to me. You just be ready to move quickly when it happens." Rodriguez watched as Fatima disappeared into the darkness, moving with a silence that impressed even the experienced SEALs. She seemed to know exactly where to place each step to avoid loose stones or unstable ground. Chun had moved into position and was watching the observation post through his scope. "I can see him," he reported quietly. "Looks like he's got a Russian night vision scope and what appears to be a Chinese radio. Definitely not standard Taliban equipment." This confirmed Rodriguez's suspicion that they were dealing with foreign fighters. The combination of professional equipment and tactics suggested these were experienced soldiers, possibly mercenaries or volunteers from conflicts in Chechnya, Bosnia, or other war zones. Davis had completed his flanking movement and reported no additional enemy positions in the immediate area. They were as ready as they could be for whatever Fatima had planned. Rodriguez was beginning to wonder if something had gone wrong when he heard it, the sound of rocks beginning to shift and tumble down the mountainside. It started as a few small stones, then gradually built into a minor avalanche. Through his night vision, he could see the enemy sentry ducking for cover as rocks bounced off the ground around his position. The rockslide lasted for about 30 seconds, then gradually subsided. Rodriguez could hear the sentry speaking into his radio in what sounded like Russian, presumably reporting the incident to his commanders. A few minutes later, Fatima appeared beside Rodriguez as silently as she had left. "It is done," she whispered. "The path is clear, but we must move quickly. They will send someone to check on him if he does not report in on schedule." "What did you do to him?" Rodriguez asked as they began moving forward. "A rock fell on his head," Fatima replied matter-of-factly. "In these mountains, such accidents happen often. His commanders will think nothing of it." Rodriguez realized that this woman had just eliminated an enemy sentry in a way that would avoid alerting the entire enemy force. She had done it silently, efficiently, and with a method that would appear completely natural to anyone investigating. It was exactly the kind of tactical thinking that Special Forces units spent years training to develop. As they moved past the observation post, Rodriguez could see the body of the enemy fighter partially buried under the rocks that Fatima had somehow directed to fall exactly where she wanted them. The level of skill and planning required for such a precise accident was remarkable. They continued climbing for another hour before Fatima signaled for another halt. This time, she led them to a small cave that provided perfect concealment and an excellent view of the valley below. "There," she said, pointing to a series of positions scattered across the mountainside. "Those are where the snipers hide during the day. At night, they move to different positions for their attacks." Rodriguez studied the area through his binoculars. He could see evidence of human activity, disturbed earth, makeshift shelters, and what appeared to be carefully constructed firing positions. But what impressed him most was how well concealed everything was. Without Fatima's guidance, they could have searched for days without finding these positions. "How many are there?" Chen asked. "7 total," Fatima replied. 4 are professional snipers from Chechnya. 2 are bomb makers from Iraq. 1 is their commander, a man from Bosnia who fought in their civil war. Rodriguez was amazed by the detailed intelligence this woman had gathered. "How do you know all this?" Fatima's expression darkened. "Because I listen to them when they think no one is watching. They are not careful around women. They think we are stupid and cannot understand military talk. They speak freely in front of the local women they have forced to cook and clean for them." "You've been inside their camp?" "Many times. They took over our village as their base. The women were forced to serve them, and the men were either killed or sent away. I pretended to be just another village woman who was afraid and obedient." Rodriguez began to understand the full scope of what this woman had been doing. She had been conducting a solo intelligence operation behind enemy lines, gathering detailed information about a professional military unit while maintaining her cover as a harmless local woman. "That's how you know their routines and procedures," he said. Fatima nodded. "I know when they sleep, when they eat, when they change positions. I know which weapons they prefer and how much ammunition they carry. I know their strengths and their weaknesses." "What are their weaknesses?" Davis asked. "They are overconfident. They believe they are fighting ordinary American soldiers who will follow predictable tactics. They do not expect to be hunted by people who know these mountains better than they do. And they have one very big weakness that you can use against them." "What's that?" Fatima pointed to a position about 500 yards away. "Their commander always positions himself in the same location during night operations. He thinks it is the safest spot, with good escape routes and excellent fields of fire. But there is one angle he cannot see, one approach he cannot defend." Rodriguez followed her pointing finger and saw what appeared to be an impregnable position on a rocky outcrop. But as he studied it more carefully, he began to see what Fatima was referring to. There was a narrow approach from the west that would be invisible to anyone in that position. "You want us to take out their commander first," he said. "Without their leader, the others will become confused and make mistakes. They are good soldiers individually, but they depend on his coordination and planning. Remove him, and they become just 6 frightened men in the dark." Rodriguez had to admit the strategy made sense. Decapitation strikes against enemy leadership had been effective in numerous special forces operations. And if this commander really was as important to their tactics as Fatima suggested, eliminating him could significantly improve their chances. "How do we get to that position without being seen?" Chen asked. Fatima smiled again. "I will show you. But first, You must understand something about these men. They are not fighting for Afghanistan or for Islam or for any cause except money. They are mercenaries who came here to kill Americans and collect bounties. This means they are dangerous, but also predictable. They will fight hard to protect themselves, but they will not sacrifice themselves for their mission. This was valuable tactical intelligence. Mercenaries typically fought differently than true believers or patriotic soldiers. They could be extremely effective, but they also had limits to how much risk they were willing to take. There's something else you need to know, Fatima continued. They have been expecting your rescue. They know that eventually, your army will send helicopters or more soldiers to help you. Their plan is to kill all of you before help arrives and then disappear back across the border. How long do they think they have? Their intelligence says American rescue operations typically take 4 to 5 days to organize in this region. Today is your 4th day. They believe they must finish you tonight or tomorrow night at the latest. Rodriguez realized that their timeline was even tighter than he had thought. If enemy intelligence was accurate, their rescue would indeed arrive soon, but probably too late to help them in their current situation. We need to end this tonight, he said firmly. Fatima nodded. Yes, but not the way you originally planned. Your idea of hunting them one by one will take too long and create too much noise. By the time you eliminate the second one, the others will know they are under attack and will either escape or launch their final assault on your friends. What do you suggest? We eliminate them all at the same time. Rodriguez stared at her. All 7. How? I have been preparing for this opportunity for 3 weeks. I know where each one will be positioned tonight. I know their timing and their procedures. And I know their one fatal weakness. Which is, Fatima pointed to the valley floor, where Rodriguez could now see the faint lights of what appeared to be a small camp. They all returned to that base camp for final coordination before their attacks. For approximately 15 minutes every night, they are all in the same place at the same time. Rodriguez studied the camp through his binoculars. It was well positioned from a defensive standpoint, with good fields of fire and multiple escape routes. But if Fatima was right about the timing, there might be a window of opportunity. When does this coordination meeting happen? Between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m. Always the same time. They are very disciplined about their schedules. Rodriguez checked his watch, 2:15 a.m. They had just over an hour to get into position for what could be a decisive strike. But attacking a fortified position with only 3 men, even with the element of surprise, would be extremely risky. What kind of defensive measures do they have at the base camp? 2 guards with automatic weapons. Motion sensors at the main approaches. But there is a way in that they do not watch because they believe it is impossible to use. Show me. Fatima led them to a different vantage point that provided a view of the camp from another angle. She pointed to what appeared to be a sheer cliff face that dropped directly into the camp from above. You can rappel down that cliff face directly into their compound. They do not guard it because they think no one would be crazy enough to attempt it in the darkness. Rodriguez had to admit that the idea was crazy. Rappelling down an unknown cliff face at night into a camp full of armed enemy fighters was the kind of operation that could easily get everyone killed. But looking at the terrain and the layout of the camp, he began to see how it could work. What about equipment? We don't have rappelling gear with us. Fatima reached into her pack and pulled out several lengths of rope and some basic climbing hardware. I came prepared. I have been planning this attack for weeks. Rodriguez realized that this woman had been planning a solo assault on 7 professional soldiers. The courage and determination that would require was staggering. But it also suggested that she might have insights and preparations that could make their mission successful. You were planning to do this alone? If necessary. But, with your help, we can be sure that none of them escape. Rodriguez looked at Chun and Davis. Both men had been listening to the conversation, and he could see that they were thinking the same thing he was. This was either a brilliant opportunity or an elaborate trap. But, given their current situation, it might be their best chance to turn the tables on an enemy that had been hunting them for 3 days. All right, he said finally. We try it your way. But we do this as the cliff face that Fatima led them to was even more intimidating up close than it had appeared through binoculars. A near vertical drop of roughly 60 feet into the enemy camp below, with loose rock and minimal anchor points for their ropes. Rodriguez had done plenty of rappelling during his SEAL training, but always with proper equipment and in controlled conditions. This was going to be something entirely different. "Are you certain this is our best option?" Chen asked quietly as he studied the drop through his night vision scope. Fatima pointed down into the camp below, where they could see the faint heat signatures of several armed men moving around what appeared to be a command tent. "In 20 minutes, they will all be in that tent for their final briefing. It is the only time when all 7 are together in one place. If we miss this opportunity, we will have to hunt them individually while they are spread across the mountainside." Rodriguez knew she was right. Their original plan of hunting the snipers one by one had been compromised when they encountered Fatima and learned about the enemy's professional procedures and security measures. This coordinated strike represented their best chance to end the threat quickly and decisively. "How long do we have once they're all in the tent?" Davis asked. 15 minutes maximum, Fatima replied. Then, they separate and move to their attack positions. After that, it becomes much more difficult. Rodriguez tested the anchor point that Fatima had prepared for their ropes. She had wedged several pieces of climbing hardware into cracks in the rock, creating a surprisingly secure anchor system. Wherever this woman had learned her climbing skills, she knew what she was doing. "Chun, you're going to position yourself on that ridge where you can cover the entire camp," Rodriguez said, pointing to a rocky outcrop about 300 yards away. "Your job is to eliminate anyone who tries to escape and provide covering fire if things go wrong." Chen nodded and began moving toward his sniper position, carrying his rifle and extra ammunition. His movement was silent and professional, and within minutes he had disappeared into the shadows. "Davis, you're coming down with me," Rodriguez continued. "We hit the tent hard and fast. Flashbangs first. Then, we engage any targets that survive the initial assault." "What about the perimeter guards?" Davis asked. Fatima pulled out what appeared to be a handmade slingshot and several smooth stones. "I will handle them. These men do not expect to be attacked by a village woman with traditional weapons. By the time they realize what is happening, you will already be in the tent." Rodriguez studied her makeshift weapon with surprise. "You're planning to take out armed guards with a slingshot?" "You would be surprised how effective traditional weapons can be when used properly," Fatima replied. "David killed Goliath with similar equipment, and I have been practicing every day for 3 weeks." Looking at her calm confidence and thinking about everything else she had accomplished during their mission, Rodriguez decided that underestimating this woman would be a serious mistake. If she said she could handle the guards with a slingshot, he was inclined to believe her. "What's the signal for when the meeting starts?" he asked. "The guards will move to their night watch positions," Fatima explained. "One will go to the north side of the camp, one to the south. When they are both in position, the meeting begins. That is when we strike." Rodriguez and Davis checked their equipment one final time. Suppressed rifles, flashbang grenades, extra ammunition, medical supplies, and emergency signaling devices. Everything they would need for a quick assault and extraction. The descent began at exactly 3:25 a.m. Rodriguez went first, rappelling slowly and carefully down the cliff face. The rock was more stable than he had expected, but the darkness made it difficult to judge distances and find good footing. His night vision goggles helped, but they also limited his depth perception. Halfway down, he paused to listen for any signs that they had been detected. The enemy camp below was quiet except for the normal sounds of men preparing for a mission, muffled voices, the clink of equipment, and the occasional radio transmission. Davis followed, moving with the same careful precision. Both SEALs had practiced countless hours of silent movement and stealth operations, but rappelling into an enemy camp at night pushed their skills to the limit. When Rodriguez reached the bottom of the cliff, he found himself in a narrow space between 2 large tents, perfectly positioned to approach the command tent without being seen by the perimeter guards. Fatima's intelligence about the camp layout had been exactly correct. Davis landed beside him a minute later, and they quickly coiled their ropes and prepared for the assault. Through the thin walls of the command tent, they could hear voices speaking in Russian and what sounded like Arabic. The meeting was about to begin. Rodriguez activated his radio for a brief transmission to Chun. Overwatch, we are in position. Copy, came Chin's whispered reply. I have eyes on both perimeter guards. Waiting for your signal. Rodriguez looked at his watch, 3:32 a.m. If Fatima was right about the timing, they had about 3 minutes before the meeting officially started, and all 7 enemy fighters were inside the tent. From their position, Rodriguez could see Fatima moving silently through the shadows on the north side of the camp. She had discarded her shoes and was moving barefoot, which allowed her to feel for loose stones and avoid making noise. Her approach to the first guard was absolutely silent. Rodriguez watched in fascination as she got within 10 feet of the guard without being detected. The man was facing outward, watching for threats from outside the camp. He never thought to look behind him. Fatima's slingshot made almost no noise when she used it. Just a soft thwip sound as the stone was released, followed by a dull thud as it struck the guard in the back of the head. The man dropped immediately, unconscious or dead. 1 down, 6 to go. The second guard was on the south side of the camp, positioned where he could watch the main approach trail. Fatima moved toward him with the same silent efficiency, but this time she had to cross more open ground. Rodriguez held his breath as she worked her way around the camp perimeter, using every bit of available cover to stay hidden. This guard was more alert than the first one, occasionally turning to scan different directions. When Fatima was about 15 feet away from the second guard, Rodriguez saw her freeze. The guard had turned in her direction and appeared to be looking directly at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the guard relaxed and turned away, apparently dismissing whatever he thought he had seen as a trick of the shadows. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Fatima's second shot was as accurate as her first. The guard dropped silently to the ground, and she immediately moved to drag his body behind some equipment where it wouldn't be visible. Rodriguez keyed his radio. Perimeter is clear. Moving to assault position. He and Davis crept forward to the command tent, positioning themselves on either side of the entrance. Through the canvas walls, they could hear at least 4 different voices discussing what sounded like attack plans and timing. Rodriguez pulled out a flashbang grenade and prepared to breach the tent. This was the moment of truth. Everything depended on eliminating all the enemy fighters inside before any of them could react or escape. Ready? He whispered to Davis. Davis nodded and raised his rifle to cover the entrance. Rodriguez ripped open the tent flap and threw the flashbang grenade inside. Flash out, he shouted, giving Davis warning to look away and protect his night vision. The explosion inside the tent was deafening. Even through his ear protection, Rodriguez felt the concussion wave. Before the sound had faded, he was inside the tent with his rifle up and ready. The scene inside was chaos. 7 men had been gathered around a table covered with maps and documents, and the flashbang had caught them completely by surprise. Several were on the ground, temporarily blinded and deafened. Others were trying to grab for weapons. Rodriguez engaged the first target he saw, a tall man in military fatigues who was reaching for an AK-47. 2 quick shots to the chest dropped him immediately. Davis was right behind Rodriguez, engaging targets on the left side of the tent. His suppressed rifle made soft, puff sounds as he fired controlled pairs into 2 more enemy fighters. But professional soldiers recover quickly from even the most disorienting attacks. Within seconds, the remaining enemy fighters were beginning to respond. Rodriguez saw one of them, partially recovered from the flashbang, raising a pistol in his direction. He shifted his aim and fired, but the man's shot went off at almost the same time. Rodriguez felt the bullet pass inches from his head. The tent was filling with smoke from the flashbang, making it difficult to see clearly even with night vision. Rodriguez moved to his left, trying to get a better angle on the remaining targets while avoiding friendly fire with Davis. A burst of automatic gunfire erupted from the far side of the tent as one of the enemy fighters opened up with what sounded like an American M4 rifle, probably captured equipment. The bullets tore through the canvas walls, and Rodriguez heard Davis grunt as he dove for cover. "Davis, you hit," Rodriguez called out while engaging another target. "Negative, just keeping my head down," Davis replied, continuing to fire at targets on his side of the tent. Rodriguez counted the enemy fighters he could see, 5 down, 2 still moving. But The tent was now full of smoke and torn canvas, making it difficult to track exactly where everyone was. One of the remaining fighters made a break for the tent entrance, trying to escape into the camp. Rodriguez shifted his aim to intercept, but the man was fast and had a head start. That's when Chin's sniper rifle spoke from his overwatch position. The escaping fighter dropped immediately, taken down by a precise shot from 300 yards away in near-total darkness. The last enemy fighter in the tent had taken cover behind an overturned table and was firing wildly in all directions. Rodriguez could see him clearly now, a bearded man in his 40s wearing a mixture of military and civilian clothing. This had to be the commander that Fatima had told them about. Rodriguez and Davis coordinated their approach, moving to flank the commander's position from both sides. The man was clearly skilled and experienced, but he was trapped and outnumbered. "Give up," Rodriguez shouted in English, then repeated the command in what little Arabic he knew. The commander's response was another burst of gunfire and what sounded like curses in multiple languages. Rodriguez decided that negotiation was not going to be an option. The final engagement lasted only a few more seconds. Rodriguez and Davis attacked from two directions simultaneously, and the commander could not defend against both angles of attack. When the shooting stopped, all 7 enemy fighters were down. Rodriguez immediately began checking each body to confirm they were no longer a threat, while Davis secured any weapons and important documents from the table where the meeting had been taking place. "Overwatch, this is Assault Team," Rodriguez reported to Chun. "Objective complete. 7 enemy Kia, no friendly casualties." "Copy that," Chun replied. "I see movement in the village below. Looks like the gunfire has attracted attention. We need to extract quickly." Rodriguez gathered up the maps and documents that had been on the table, while Davis collected weapons and anything else that might provide intelligence about enemy operations in the region. They had only a few minutes before local fighters or curious villagers arrived to investigate the gunfire. As they prepared to leave the tent, Fatima appeared in the entrance. Her face showed no emotion as she looked at the bodies of the men who had killed her family and terrorized her village. "It is finished," she said quietly. Rodriguez nodded. "Yes, but we need to get out of here. There will be others coming soon." Fatima led them to a different exit route than the cliff they had used for the assault. This path was longer but easier to navigate quickly, especially while carrying captured equipment and documents. As they climbed away from the camp, Rodriguez could see lights beginning to appear in the village below. Word of the gunfight was spreading, and soon the area would be crawling with people trying to figure out what had happened. "Where does this trail lead?" Rodriguez asked Fatima as they moved higher into the mountains. "Back to where your friends are waiting," she replied. "But we will approach from a different direction, so they do not mistake us for enemies." Rodriguez realized that Fatima had planned not just the assault, but also the extraction route and the approach back to their defensive position. Her level of tactical thinking and preparation was remarkable for someone with no formal military training. They climbed for another hour before Rodriguez felt safe enough to rest and radio their position to Anderson and the rest of the team. The mission had been a complete success, all 7 enemy snipers eliminated with no friendly casualties. But Rodriguez knew that this was only the beginning of what would become a much larger story. As they sat in the darkness, catching their breath and planning their return to the main team, Rodriguez looked at Fatima with new respect. This woman had just helped them accomplish something that might have been impossible with conventional tactics. She had turned what could have been a disaster into a decisive victory. The reunion with the rest of the SEAL team took place just as the first light of dawn was beginning to appear over the eastern peaks. Chief Petty Officer Anderson had positioned his men in a defensive perimeter, ready for the enemy assault that had never come. When Rodriguez, Chun, Davis, and Fatima appeared on the trail approaching their position, Anderson's relief was visible even through his night vision goggles. "Report," Anderson said as soon as they were within the perimeter. "Mission accomplished," Rodriguez replied. 7 enemy Kia. No friendly casualties. The sniper threat has been eliminated. Anderson looked at the 4 of them with amazement. When Rodriguez had led his team out 12 hours earlier, Anderson had given them maybe a 50% chance of success. The enemy snipers they had been facing were professionals, well-equipped, and expertly positioned. Eliminating all of them in a single night seemed almost impossible. How did you manage it? Williams, the team medic, asked. Rodriguez gestured toward Fatima, who had been standing quietly to one side. We had help. This is Fatima. Without her local knowledge and tactical assistance, the mission would have failed. Anderson studied the Afghan woman with interest. In his 15 years as a SEAL, he had worked with local allies many times, but rarely in such direct combat operations. And never with someone who appeared to have no formal military training. Ma'am, Anderson said respectfully, on behalf of the team, thank you for your assistance. Fatima nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing. Rodriguez could see that she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The night's operation had been the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation for her personal war against the men who had killed her family. Thompson, the radio operator, approached Rodriguez with their communications equipment. Boss, I've been trying to raise headquarters all night. I finally got through about an hour ago. They want a full status report as soon as possible. Rodriguez took the radio and began transmitting their situation report to their command base. As he spoke, he could see Fatima watching the distant village where the enemy camp had been located. Smoke was rising from several locations, and even at this distance they could see people moving around the area. Base, this is Neptune 7, Rodriguez said into the radio. Mission status. All objectives completed. Enemy sniper threat eliminated. 7 enemy Kia confirmed. No friendly casualties. Requesting immediate extraction. The voice that came back over the radio belonged to their commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison. Neptune 7, confirm your last transmission. Did you say 7 enemy Kia? That's affirmative, base. All enemy snipers eliminated during coordinated night assault. There was a long pause before Morrison's voice came back. Neptune 7, be advised that you have priority extraction. Birds are already in the air. ETA to your position is 40 minutes. Rodriguez looked at his watch, 6:15 a.m. They had been trapped in these mountains for 4 days, but extraction helicopters were already on the way. The timing suggested that their command had been planning a rescue operation regardless of the night's mission results. Base, we also have one local national who provided critical assistance during the operation. Request permission to extract her with the team. Another pause. Neptune 7, what is the nature of this local national's assistance? Rodriguez looked at Fatima, who was now listening to the radio conversation with obvious interest. How could he explain to his commanding officer that a village woman with no military training had just helped them accomplish something that might have been impossible otherwise? Base, local national provided intelligence and tactical guidance that was essential to mission success. Recommend immediate extraction for her safety. Understood, Neptune 7. Bring her along. We'll sort out the details once you're back at base. Rodriguez signed off and turned to address his team. Extraction in 40 minutes. Everyone police up your gear and prepare for immediate departure. As the team began preparing for extraction, Rodriguez noticed that Fatima had moved away from the group and was sitting alone on a large rock, looking out over the valley below. He approached her carefully. The helicopters are coming to take us back to our base, he told her. You're welcome to come with us if you want. It might be safer than staying here. Fatima was quiet for a long moment. Where would you take me? Initially to our base in Kandahar. After that, we could arrange for you to be relocated somewhere safe, maybe even to America if you want. She shook her head. This is my home. These are my mountains. I do not want to go to America. Rodriguez understood her feelings, but he was concerned about her safety. The people in your village might not understand what happened last night. If they think you helped Americans kill Afghan fighters, it could be dangerous for you. Fatima smiled sadly. You still do not understand who those men were. They were not Afghan fighters. They were foreign invaders who came here to kill people for money. The villagers will celebrate their deaths, not mourn them. Rodriguez was surprised by this perspective. In his experience, local populations usually had complex and sometimes contradictory feelings about American military operations, even when those operations eliminated genuine threats. Even so, he said, word of your assistance to us will spread. There might be others who see you as a collaborator. Perhaps, Fatima acknowledged. But running away will not solve that problem. If I leave now, my neighbors will always wonder if I was truly helping my people or helping foreigners. If I stay and face whatever comes, they will know where my loyalty lies. Rodriguez had to respect her courage and her reasoning. This woman had already demonstrated remarkable bravery by conducting a 3-week solo intelligence operation against professional killers. Staying to face the consequences of her actions was consistent with the character she had already shown. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Return to my village. Help rebuild what those men destroyed. Try to live a normal life again." Rodriguez reached into his pack and pulled out one of his military radios and a spare battery. "Take this," he said. "If you ever need help, contact the American base in Kandahar on this frequency." He wrote down the radio frequency and call signs on a piece of paper. "Tell them you are Fatima, friend of Neptune 7. They will know what that means." Fatima accepted the radio and the paper, tucking them into her pack. "Thank you. I hope we meet again under better circumstances." "So do I," Rodriguez replied sincerely. The sound of approaching helicopters interrupted their conversation. 2 Black Hawk aircraft were coming in low over the mountains, following a flight path that would bring them directly to the landing zone that Thompson had marked with infrared strobes. As the helicopters touched down, Rodriguez gathered his team for the extraction. They had accomplished their mission, survived 4 days of being hunted by professional snipers, and eliminated a significant threat to American forces in the region. It was the kind of operation that would be written up in after-action reports and possibly used as a case study in special forces training programs. But Rodriguez knew that the real story of this mission was not about American military tactics or equipment. It was about the courage and determination of a woman who had lost everything but refused to give up fighting for what was right. As the team boarded the helicopters, Rodriguez took one last look at Fatima, who was already walking back toward the village where she had been born and where she planned to live whatever life remained to her. He had a feeling that this would not be the last time he heard about her. The flight back to Kandahar took about 90 minutes, giving Rodriguez time to think about the events of the past 4 days and what they meant for his team and his career. Eliminating 7 enemy snipers in a single operation was a significant achievement, but the methods they had used were highly unusual and would certainly attract attention from higher command levels. When they landed at the American base in Kandahar, Rodriguez was surprised to see Lieutenant Commander Morrison waiting for them on the flight line, along with several other officers he didn't recognize. The presence of so many senior personnel suggested that this debriefing was going to be more extensive than usual. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Morrison said as soon as the team had disembarked from the helicopters. "Outstanding work out there. We need a complete debrief as soon as possible." "Yes, sir," Rodriguez replied. "The team is ready." Morrison gestured toward the unknown officers. "This is Colonel Patricia Hayes from JSOC headquarters and Major David Kim from military intelligence. They've been following your situation very closely." Rodriguez felt a slight chill. The Joint Special Operations Command rarely sent colonels to debrief routine SEAL operations, even successful ones. And military intelligence involvement suggested that there were aspects to this mission that went beyond simple tactical success. "Sergeant," Colonel Hayes said, stepping forward. "Before we begin the formal debriefing, I need to ask you about the local national who assisted your team. Can you tell me exactly what role she played in the operation?" Rodriguez chose his words carefully. "Ma'am, the individual you're referring to provided critical intelligence about enemy positions, routines, and vulnerabilities. Without her assistance, the mission would have been significantly more difficult and potentially unsuccessful." "I see," Hayes said. "And what was her motivation for providing this assistance?" "The enemy fighters had killed members of her family and were using her village as a base of operations. She wanted them eliminated." Major Kim stepped forward with a folder full of documents. "Sergeant, we've been conducting our own intelligence analysis of the enemy fighters you eliminated. What we've discovered is quite interesting." Kim opened the folder and showed Rodriguez several photographs. These 7 men were not typical Taliban or insurgent fighters. They were professional soldiers with extensive combat experience in multiple conflicts. 3 of them were wanted by Interpol for war crimes in Bosnia. 2 others were suspected of being involved in terrorist attacks in Russia. Rodriguez studied the photographs with growing surprise. These were not just mercenaries or foreign fighters looking to make money in Afghanistan. They were international criminals with connections to terrorist organizations around the world. Sir, we had no intelligence about their backgrounds before the operation, Rodriguez said. We understand that, Colonel Hayes replied. What's significant is that these men represented a much larger threat than anyone realized at the time. Their elimination has disrupted a network of professional killers who were operating throughout this region. Major Kim showed Rodriguez another set of documents. The intelligence materials your team recovered from their camp have provided us with information about planned attacks on American and NATO forces throughout Afghanistan. We estimate that your mission may have prevented dozens of casualties among Allied forces. Rodriguez began to understand why so many senior officers were involved in this debriefing. What had seemed like a tactical operation to eliminate a local threat had actually disrupted an international network of professional killers. There's something else, Colonel Hayes continued. The methods your team used to locate and eliminate these targets were highly innovative. The integration of local knowledge with special forces tactics represents a significant development in counterterrorism operations. Ma'am, the credit for that belongs to our local ally, not to my team, Rodriguez said honestly. We understand that, Hayes replied, which is why we're very interested in learning more about her capabilities and background. Was she former military? Intelligence service? How did she develop such advanced tactical skills? Rodriguez realized that he actually knew very little about Fatima's background. In their brief time together, he had been focused on the immediate mission rather than her personal history. Ma'am, I don't have detailed information about her background. She presented herself as a village woman who had been conducting surveillance of the enemy fighters for personal reasons. But her skills and knowledge were far beyond what we would expect from a civilian. Major Kim made notes in his folder. We're going to want to interview her if possible. Her insights into enemy operations and her tactical innovations could be valuable for future operations. Rodriguez felt uncomfortable with this direction of questioning. 3 months after the mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez was stationed at a forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan when he received an encrypted message that would change his understanding of everything that had happened that night. The message was brief and came through channels that suggested it originated from very high levels of military intelligence. Neptune 7 leader, request immediate secure communication regarding Fatima follow-up. Priority Alpha. Colonel Hayes, JSOC. Rodriguez felt a knot form in his stomach as he read the message. He had been hoping that the intelligence community would leave Fatima alone, but apparently that had been wishful thinking. He made his way to the base communications center and placed the secure call to Colonel Hayes. Sergeant Rodriguez. Hayes' voice came through clearly despite the encrypted connection. Thank you for responding quickly. We need to discuss some developments regarding your local ally from the Hindu Kush operation. Ma'am, I hope she hasn't been put in danger because of our mission, Rodriguez said immediately. Actually, it's quite the opposite, Hayes replied, and Rodriguez could hear something like amazement in her voice. What we've discovered about her background is extraordinary. Are you somewhere you can receive classified information? Rodriguez confirmed that he was in a secure location and that no one else could overhear their conversation. Sergeant, the woman you knew as Fatima is not who she appeared to be, Hayes began. Her real name is Dr. Fatima Azizi, and she holds advanced degrees in military history and strategic studies from universities in London and Paris. She's also a former intelligence officer with the Northern Alliance who worked closely with CIA operatives during the initial invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. Rodriguez felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The village woman who had helped them eliminate 7 professional killers was actually a highly educated former intelligence officer? Ma'am, that doesn't make sense, he said. She presented herself as a local villager who had lost her family to the enemy fighters. That part was true, Hayes continued. After the fall of the Taliban government, Dr. Azizi retired from intelligence work and returned to her family's village to live a quiet civilian life. She married a local teacher, and they had 2 sons. When the foreign fighters arrived and took over her village, they did kill her husband and sons, exactly as she told you. Rodriguez tried to process this information. Fatima's grief and desire for revenge had been completely genuine, but her capabilities and knowledge came from a background in professional intelligence work rather than natural talent and determination. There's more, Hayes said. We've been analyzing the intelligence materials your team recovered from the enemy camp. Dr. Aziz's 3-week surveillance operation provided information that our best intelligence agencies had been trying to gather for months. What kind of information? The 7 men you eliminated were part of a larger network of international fighters who have been conducting operations against coalition forces throughout Afghanistan and Pakistan. Dr. Azizi had identified not just their local operations, but connections to cells in 3 other countries. Rodriguez was beginning to understand the full scope of what Fatima had accomplished during her solo intelligence operation. She had not just been planning revenge against the men who killed her family. She had been conducting a professional intelligence gathering mission that had revealed a much larger threat. Sir, does she know that we've discovered her background? We haven't made contact with her directly, Hayes replied. But, given her experience, she probably assumes that we would eventually identify her. The question is what we do with this information. Rodriguez felt protective of Fatima, regardless of her real background. Ma'am, she helped us accomplish our mission and probably saved the lives of my entire team. Whatever her background, she deserves to be left alone if that's what she wants. I agree completely, Hayes said, surprising Rodriguez. But the situation has become more complicated. The intelligence she gathered has helped us identify and eliminate terrorist cells in Pakistan and Uzbekistan. Her work has prevented attacks that could have killed hundreds of people. That's good news, isn't it? It is, but it's also attracted attention from intelligence services in multiple countries. Some of them would very much like to recruit Dr. Aziz for ongoing operations. Rodriguez felt the knot in his stomach tighten. And others might see her as a threat that needs to be eliminated. Exactly, which is why we need to offer her protection and support, whether she wants to continue intelligence work or just wants to live in peace. Rodriguez thought about the woman he had met in the mountains, her determination, her courage, and her simple desire to live a normal life after eliminating the men who had destroyed her family. Has anyone asked her what she wants? There was a pause before Hayes answered. That's actually why I'm calling you, Sergeant. Dr. Azizi has requested a meeting with you specifically. She wants to discuss her options with someone she trusts. Rodriguez was honored by her trust, but also concerned about what it might mean for her safety and his own future assignments. Where and when, he asked. Tomorrow, at a secure location in Kabul. You'll be transported there by helicopter and escorted by a full security team. This meeting is being conducted at the highest levels of classification. Rodriguez agreed to the meeting, and 24 hours later, he found himself in a safe house in Kabul, waiting to be reunited with the remarkable woman who had changed the course of his most dangerous mission. When Fatima entered the room, Rodriguez barely recognized her. Instead of the village clothes she had worn in the mountains, she was now dressed in Western business attire that suggested the educated professional she actually was. But her eyes held the same determination and intelligence he remembered. Marcus, she said, using his first name for the first time. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Fatima, or should I call you Dr. Azizi? She smiled slightly. Fatima is fine. That has always been my real name. They sat across from each other at a small table in what was obviously a room designed for sensitive conversations. Rodriguez assumed that every word was being recorded and analyzed by intelligence professionals. I suppose you have questions about my background, Fatima said. A few, Rodriguez acknowledged. But mainly I want to know if you're safe and what you need from us. Fatima's expression became serious. I am safe for now, but that situation will not last indefinitely. My work with you has attracted attention from people who see opportunity in my skills and knowledge. What kind of opportunity? Some want to recruit me for ongoing intelligence operations. Others want to eliminate me because they see my knowledge as a threat to their own operations. A few simply want to use me as a propaganda tool. The Afghan woman who helped Americans kill Muslim fighters. Rodriguez could see the impossible situation she faced. Her assistance to his team had been motivated by personal reasons, but the consequences reached far beyond personal revenge. What do you want to do? Fatima was quiet for a moment. looking out the window at the busy streets of Kabul. I want to continue the work I started in my village. Not for revenge anymore, but because it needs to be done. What kind of work? The foreign fighters who killed my family were part of a larger network that threatens innocent people throughout this region. My 3-week surveillance operation revealed connections and patterns that could help prevent future attacks. Rodriguez understood what she was saying. Fatima had discovered that she could use her intelligence skills and local knowledge to identify and eliminate threats that might be invisible to conventional intelligence agencies. You want to continue doing intelligence work? I want to do the right thing, she corrected. Sometimes that means intelligence work. Sometimes it means direct action. Sometimes it means helping people rebuild their lives after violence. I have skills and knowledge that can be used to help people, and I think I have an obligation to use them. Rodriguez respected her sense of duty, but he was concerned about the risks she would face. What kind of support would you need? Official backing from the American government, access to intelligence resources when necessary, and protection from those who would try to use or eliminate me for their own purposes. Rodriguez realized that Fatima was essentially proposing to become an independent intelligence asset, working with American forces when their interests aligned but maintaining her own autonomy and agenda. That's a complicated arrangement, he said. Yes, but it's the only arrangement that makes sense given my situation and capabilities. They talked for another hour about the practical aspects of what she was proposing. Rodriguez learned that Fatima had already identified several other foreign fighter networks operating in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that her intelligence had been instrumental in preventing 3 separate terrorist attacks in the past 2 months. When their meeting was coming to an end, Rodriguez asked the question that had been bothering him since learning about her background. Why didn't you tell us who you really were that night in the mountains? Fatima smiled. Would you have trusted me if I had introduced myself as a former intelligence officer with advanced degrees in military strategy? Or were you more likely to trust a grieving village woman who simply wanted justice for her murdered family? Rodriguez had to laugh. She was absolutely right. His team would have been extremely suspicious of anyone with professional intelligence credentials, but they had immediately accepted and trusted the village woman who had clearly suffered at the hands of their enemies. You manipulated us, he said, but without any anger. I gave you the truth in a form you could accept and act upon, she corrected. My grief was real, my desire for justice was real, and my knowledge of enemy operations was real. The only thing I concealed was the source of my tactical and intelligence capabilities. Rodriguez realized that Fatima had demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and psychological insight that made her so effective as an intelligence IMA had risked her life to help them. And now it seemed like military intelligence wanted to exploit her knowledge for other purposes. Sir, she specifically chose not to accept extraction with our team. She wanted to return to her normal life in her village. I don't think she's interested in further involvement with military operations. Colonel Hayes and Major Kim exchanged glances. Nevertheless, Hayes said, we may need to make contact with her for additional debriefing. Her knowledge of enemy networks in this region could be crucial for ongoing operations. Rodriguez decided that he needed to be completely honest about his concerns. Ma'am, with respect, this woman has already risked everything to help us. If American intelligence officers start showing up in her village asking questions, it could put her in serious danger from people who might see her as a collaborator. We understand your concerns, Sergeant, Hayes replied. Any contact with her would be handled with appropriate discretion and security measures. Rodriguez hoped that was true, but he had seen enough intelligence operations to know that appropriate discretion sometimes had different meanings for different people. The formal debriefing lasted for several more hours, with Rodriguez and his team providing detailed accounts of every aspect of their 4-day mission. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in Fatima's methods for gathering information about enemy operations and her tactical innovations during the assault. When the debriefing was finally complete, Rodriguez and his team were released to rest and prepare for their next assignment. But as Rodriguez walked back to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story of their mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains was far from over. Somewhere in those mountains, a woman was walking back to her village, carrying secrets that powerful people in multiple governments would very much like to know. And Rodriguez had a growing certainty that Fatima's quiet life was about to become much more complicated than she had hoped. "Why did you really help us?" he asked her. Fatima was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is obvious, even when it is dangerous. Those men were evil, and they had to be stopped. You could not do it alone, and I could not do it alone. Together, we could." Rodriguez nodded. It was the kind of simple wisdom that often proved more valuable than elaborate military planning and sophisticated equipment. Sometimes the best strategy was just good people working together toward a common goal. But, as they prepared to rejoin the rest of the SEAL team, Rodriguez had no idea that their night's work was about to attract attention from some very unexpected places. The elimination of 7 foreign fighters in Afghanistan was the kind of operation that would be noticed by intelligence agencies around the world. And the methods they had used to accomplish it were about to make some very important people very interested in both Rodriguez's team and the remarkable woman who had made it all possible. The real consequences of this mission were only just beginning. A military operation with proper planning and coordination. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Fatima nodded. "Agreed. But you must trust me when I tell you about their procedures and timing. I have been watching them every night for weeks." Rodriguez spent the next 30 minutes developing a detailed assault plan based on Fatima's intelligence. Chin would position himself as a sniper to cover their extraction and eliminate any enemies who tried to escape. Davis would accompany Rodriguez on the rappelling assault, with specific targets and objectives for each man. Fatima would guide them to the cliff position and, then, remain as a lookout to warn them of any changes in the enemy's routine. As they prepared to move to their assault position, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to attempt something that would either be remembered as a brilliant special forces operation or a catastrophic failure. But, looking at the determination in Fatima's eyes and the professionalism of his own team members, he began to believe that they actually had a chance to pull this off. The hardest part would be the next hour, getting into position, setting up their equipment, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Because once they began their assault, there would be no turning back. They would either eliminate all 7 enemy fighters, or they would likely die in the attempt. But, as Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time and began following Fatima toward the cliff position, he realized that for the first time in 3 days, he felt like they were the hunters rather than the hunted. And that feeling alone was worth the risk they were about to take. Fighting them for 3 days, and they are still alive. I have been hunting them for 3 weeks. I know where they sleep, where they hide their supplies, and where they will be tonight. Rodriguez studied her face through his night vision. There was something in her expression, a hardness that he recognized. He had seen it in the faces of other people who had lost everything and had nothing left except revenge. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "I know a path through the mountains that will bring you above their positions. But it is dangerous and difficult to find in the darkness. Without a guide, you will become lost or fall to your death. With my help, you can eliminate all of them before dawn." Davis moved closer to Rodriguez. "This could be a trap," he whispered. Rodriguez nodded. It could definitely be a trap. But something about this woman's story rang true. The enemy snipers they had been fighting did seem to have equipment and training that was beyond what they typically encountered from local Taliban forces. And her claim about knowing the terrain was credible. Local knowledge had been a decisive factor in many Afghan conflicts. "If we agree to let you guide us," Rodriguez said carefully, "you follow our orders without question. This is a military operation, and we do things our way." Fatima nodded immediately. "I understand. I only want them dead. I do not care about your military procedures." Rodriguez made a decision that he would later realize changed everything. "All right, lead the way. But if this is some kind of setup, you'll be the first to die." Fatima simply turned and began walking deeper into the mountains, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and crevice in the area. Rodriguez signaled for Chun and Davis to follow, and they began what would turn out to be one of the most unusual joint operations in SEAL team history. As they climbed higher into the mountains, following paths that seemed to exist only in Fatima's memory, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something much bigger than a simple sniper problem. The way this woman moved, the determination in her voice, and the intimate knowledge she seemed to have of their enemies' activities suggested that there was much more to this story. Behind them, the lights of their defensive position were barely visible in the distance. Anderson and the others would be maintaining their watch, preparing for an assault that might never come. Because if Fatima was telling the truth, the hunters were about to become the hunted in a way that none of them could have imagined.